Goliath, written by Objective Campaign 82. The dry ground cracked under Barrett's feet as he lumbered towards the ramshackle town of refuge. The region was in the shadow of several mountains and rarely received any rainfall. The last shower had barely soaked into the ground before Barrett's harsh sun came up to dry and crack the mud. A few plants looked a bit greener since his last visit, and the dirty town seemed a little cleaner than before, almost pleasant-looking. He scoffed at himself. Not even 100 rainfalls were enough to make a place like refuge look like anything more than a shithole it was. Far from Paris or spaceport, and lacking in any natural resources, the only people who lived here were the societal outcasts, Gallerites, whose foul smell disturbed the noses of every species, cybernetic freaks who could no longer find any work, and criminals hiding from the law. Criminals like Barrett. Murderers, thieves, and wannabe revolutionaries. Dangerous people who all knew that the only thing that really mattered was strength. People who knew that the strongest thing out there was Barrett. Barrett was a gargantuan, the largest and strongest species to reach the stars. And even among his own people, Barrett was respected for his size and strength. His very name meant dominance. The thin, haggard residents of refuge noticed his approach and rushed to close the shutters in the little shanty town and quiver in fear, as if pitiful wood could hold him back. The residents all scattered and hid, all but one, at least. A small bipedal creature of mammalian origin. Its skin was hairless and dark like coal. It wore a dirty-looking cloth cape over its form, and a hat of some sort covered its head and cast its face in shadow. It stood in the center of refuge's main roadway, blocking Barrett's way forward. Barrett lumbered forward and glared at the little creature, shorter than even the smallest inhabitants of Barrett. "I am here for my tribute," he growled. The little creature looked up at Barrett and saw nothing but darkness in its black eyes. "You won't find it here. This town receives little enough to grow what they can, and they're tired of starving just to slake your hunger. I don't care if they're tired. If they want to keep their food, then they can try and stop me." "That's what I'm here for," the small male said. You don't even measure up to my day. How will you stop me from taking what's mine?" The creature, a human, moved his arm to pull back his dust-covered cloak and reveal a small pistol on his hip. Barrett laughed. "That little thing. It only takes one good shot. Leave while you still can. Former General Barrett, the Man-Breaker." Barrett felt alarm at hearing his old title. This far from civilized space, and in a little backwater region like this, no one should know that name. This wasn't just some brazen human. This was a bounty hunter who had tracked him all the way to refuge. Barrett went perfectly still. Then, with explosive power, he struck out at where the human stood. His boulder-sized fist cracked the ground where he struck, and threw up a wave of dust. But the human somehow saw the attack coming and ducked under his fist. The human bounty hunter charged under Barrett's legs, dodged past Barrett's attempt to kick it, and slid to stop behind Barrett. Barrett had been on the battlefield many times and had fought and killed his fair share of foes, but this human was far faster than he should have been. Barrett turned and swung at where the human stood in a great sweeping attack. The human leapt over his arm, and Barrett finally got a good glimpse of what was beneath his cloak. There, glinting with the light of the sun, were two shiny metal legs, cybernetic replacements that gave the human the strength and speed needed to match Barrett's pace. Barrett growled in disgust. "Pathetic little human. Your kind can only match our strength by mutilating yourselves. Disgusting!" The human landed and absorbed the shock in his metal knees. It glared at Barrett before throwing off his dusty cloak. Just as Barrett had seen before, the human had replaced his whole legs with shiny steel replicas. But along with his legs, the human had also replaced both of his arms and had lines of machinery along its torso to further enhance his body. It lifted its head and glared at Barrett with two glowing red eyes. "I wasn't the one who mutilated my body. This was all your doing, Barrett." It growled out in a deep, simmering rage. Barrett looked at the human again and recalled the one other time that he had encountered another human. It had been at the height of his career, just before the Gargantuan Empire fell. They had seized the human freighter, and he had chosen to crush its captain beneath his feet. It had been the incident that implicated the Terran Star League. I see I didn't finish the job, Bereth rumbled. But those machines are still not enough to match my power. This time I'll finish what I started. The human lowered itself into a fighting stance. You can try, it challenged. That was all Bereth needed. He rushed forward again and tried to kick the human man. It leapt back and onto the roof of a nearby building before leaping off again. With the added height of the building, the human had enough strength to finally reach his head. It swung its arm and threw a small pouch into Bereth's face before flying over his shoulder. Pain flared up across his exposed orifices as a red powder filled them and burned like hot coals. Bereth knew this weapon well. Chili pepper. The humans had used it to great effect during the Battle of Blenix. Enraged, Bereth spun around and tried to stomp on the pest. It darted to the side, and then another, dodging each of his attacks. Bereth fought to see through the pain of the pepper, but the tears in his eyes made it hard to see. The human stepped past his latest attack and began to run. Bereth roared and charged forward, gaining quickly on the human. It darted down a narrow alley. The alley was too small for Bereth to fit, so instead he charged through, ripping the building apart like wet paper. Wood fragments, dust, and his tear-filled vision obscured his view, but he saw the bleak dark shape of the human leap up to around Bereth's chest. He just barely saw the human and leapt forward, extending his arms to grab the human out of the air. He brought his foot forward to support his charge, and felt a sinking feeling in his chest as his foot found no ground below it. Bereth glanced down and saw a huge pit hidden just behind a wooden house rise up to swallow him. He saw tall, jagged rocks on the bottom, and he twisted mid-air onto his back to avoid falling onto the rocks head first. His back slammed into the hole, and he felt pain as the pointed rocks broke his bones and pierced his flesh. He tried to get up, but the extra weight caused the rocks to dig deeper into his, so he gave up. He looked up past the pit to stare at the high noon sun and saw something briefly flitter past it before landing on his chest. Bereth barely felt the human on his chest as the pain from the rocks blinded his senses. He could hardly make out its figure as it stepped forward, casually striding across his body. It stopped in front of Bereth's head and finally drew the pistol off its hip. I told you it would only take one, it said before firing the gun point blank into Bereth's head. He lost all sight in his left eye and had only a second to feel fear before the pain faded away and death came to take him. David stared into the dead giant's unmoving face. Blood and viscera dripped out of its now empty eye socket. He took in one breath and slowly let out through his nose. Shadows began to appear around the recently dug pit, and David glanced up to see the terrified townsfolk gather around its edge. He crouched down and jumped 5 meters into the air and easily cleared the edge of the pit. It had taken him years to finally grow accustomed to his new body. Years of surgery, recovery, and fine-tuning his new limbs to match the same range of movement he used to have before the Gargantans had seized his ship. He had been a part of the Terran relief effort for all neutral worlds inflicted by the Gargantan conquest. Bereth himself had boarded the TSL Goliath and had sadistically crushed David's bones to dust. The town's elder stared at David, fearfully glancing down at his cybernetic augmentations. Thank you, the elder said after gathering his nerves. David glanced at the bulky alien elder who reached out to the League of Bounty Hunters and had ultimately led David to his enemy. Thank you for digging the pit, he said before pushing past the elder. He stamped through the broken frame of the town general store until he reached the main dusty road of refuge. He picked up his tan-colored poncho and beat the dust off of it before swinging it around his shoulders. The nearest train station was 3 days away, and David didn't feel like staying in refuge any longer than he had to. Wait, the elder called. David glanced back. What? The elder looked sheepish, which was an odd look on the fungoid Galerite. What should we do with the body? David frowned. Bury it, of course. He did us the favor of falling into his own grave after all. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.